Yes, it's Uncle Jegs, and today it's all about diffusion in the combined science GCSE. This lesson will be broken down into these 6 sections. Number 1, how diffusion works. Number 2, factors that affect the rate of diffusion. Number 3, diffusion in animals, we'll be looking at gills, lungs and intestine. Number 4, diffusion in plants, we'll be looking at roots and leaves. Number 5, diffusion in microorganisms, and finally number 6, how to calculate surface area to volume ratio. In between each section, I'll be displaying some summary notes, so get your notepads and pens ready. If you're doing some last minute revision, pre the timestamps below to skip to what you need. And while you're down there, make sure that you download the worksheet for today. So yeah, let's jump straight into this. Every single particle in the universe is in some sort of motion. Solids vibrate in a fixed position. Liquid particles slide and roll randomly around each other. Notice how they're still touching each other, so don't draw your liquid particles with mad gaps in between them. Gas particles move randomly and quickly in all directions. Since liquids and gases are not confined to a specific fixed position, over time you expect these particles to move all over the place. This is pretty obvious when we think about gases, but look closely at the liquids as well. Even though they're touching and compact, their individual particles have randomized, unlike solid particles that stay exactly where they are. Now, imagine the particles in this fragrance. They are contained in the container, and around the container I have air particles that are randomly bouncing around everywhere. When I spray, I release some of these gases out into the air. They move randomly just like the air particles, and eventually some of them start slapping my nose and then I can smell the fragrance. Make sure you appreciate this. They are moving randomly. They're not drawn to my nose like there's some sort of magnet in my nose and that. But eventually they move from a place where there was bare of them to a place where there weren't so much of them. And now we come to diffusion. Diffusion is the overall movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. But instead of saying overall, the examiners prefer if you say net, okay? So diffusion is the net movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Always visualize diffusion as the spreading out of particles, but make sure you can write that definition in your exams to get the full marks, okay? You can speed up the rate of diffusion in 3 ways. Having a high concentration gradient, having high temperature, and having a high surface area. Concentration gradient is the difference in concentration between 2 areas. Looking at this example again, before I spray, we have a high concentration of smell particles here and a very low concentration here. If I represent that as a graph below, I have 8 smell particles here, so I plot 8, and I have 0 smell particles here, so I plot 0. Now, if I join my line, I create a gradient. A concentration gradient.
You and these dead jokes, I swear.
Now,
never make a joke again.
Look,
ever.
When I spray, the difference is not as high. The concentration gradient is pretty low now. Remember that diffusion is the net movement, overall movement, and the particles are moving randomly, so they could easily just bounce back to where they came from. But over time, they tend to spread out. Quick recap. Concentration gradient is the difference between concentration of a substance between 2 different areas. The higher the concentration gradient, the higher the rate of diffusion. Temperature is really just a measure of how fast a group of particles are moving. The only difference between this hot water and this cold one is that the particles in the hot water are moving a lot faster. They have a higher kinetic energy. And if you think about it, when you make something cooler, you're essentially slowing down the particles. If you slow down gas long enough, it becomes a liquid. You've slowed it down. Looking carefully at what has happened, The thermal energy, that is the movement energy in the particles, has moved from the gas particles and it's gone to the environment, making them move faster. We've made the environment warmer, but we've made our particles that we're concerned with cooler. Energy is never created or destroyed. Well, in GCSE anyway. When you go quantum, things get mad, but let's not worry about that. Anyway, if you slow down liquid particles more, it becomes solid. It should be pretty obvious, however, that if you increase the temperature, you're increasing the rate of diffusion. The faster the particles are moving, the quicker they'll mix together and bounce off each other, which speeds up the randomness of the particles. And so another quick recap. Temperature is related to how fast the particles in the substance are moving. This is also the kinetic energy of the particles. The higher the temperature, the higher the rate of diffusion. And now the last factor is surface area. The cell membrane of organisms is what we call a semi-permeable membrane. Permeable? It's got nothing to do with perms. It means allowing some things through, okay? Permeable, you can allow things through. Semi means partially or not completely. This fits the functions of your cell membrane, because if you remember from our lesson on the parts of a cell membranes control what goes in and out. They don't want random things just entering and leaving. They want to regulate that. Increasing the surface area means you increase the amount of surfaces exposed to the surrounding. Cells tend to do this by folding the cell membrane. This is an incredible adaptation. Let's imagine two different organisms. The first organism has a surface area of the length of one shoelace here. The second organism has a folded cell membrane, so it can pack more surface in a smaller space. Clock how the second organism has doubled the surface area. This means that the second organism will be able to get more nutrients from the environment, is better adapted, therefore it's more likely to pass on its genes for the folded membrane. Natural selection and all that. Also, notice how these folds are only on one side, the side exposed to the area that we want to absorb from. We'll be looking at specific examples in a bit. And now, quickly recapping surface area, yeah? Surface area is increased by creating more points of contact with the surrounding, and this is usually done by folds in the membrane. The higher the surface area, the higher the rate of diffusion. That was a lot of information, so I've got these 3 questions here for you to have a go at. Do have a go at it, okay? Pause the video and we'll check the answers in a bit, okay? Pause the video. I hope you actually tried that. Don't be just cheating, yeah? These are the answers. The key chemical reaction in animals is aerobic respiration. You need to memorize this equation, alright? Glucose plus oxygen gives you carbon dioxide and water. That means that every cell in Jaden's body...
Why am I the example?
Just run with it. This happens in every cell in Jaden's body. And your body too, my body too. Any animal, they need to take in glucose and oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide and water that's excess. The wall of your small intestine is covered in tiny projections called villi. These provide a high surface area to absorb nutrients like glucose from your food. They also have a rich supply of blood vessels right underneath them to shorten the diffusion pathway, thus making diffusion more effective. In your lungs, air ventilates millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli. They are not folded, but this rounded shape and the fact that you have millions of them provide a very high surface area. They also have a rich supply of blood vessels for effective gas exchange. Now this next one, I do not know why this animal here messes so many students up. But this salamander looking thing here is an axolotl, and they have gills along with other fishes as well. This helps gas exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen between their blood and the water that they're swimming in. This is done through the gills, which are just stacks of a thin filament with a rich blood supply. Notice the trend, they all have rich blood supplies. For them to maintain a concentration gradient, they need a constant flow of water through the gills, so either by pumping it through or just simply swimming. We looked at the adaptation of the root hair cells in a previous video. Click on the card to go check that out if you haven't seen it. These have a large surface area to take in water minerals more efficiently. The concentration gradient in the root is maintained via the transpiration of water from the roots to the leaves. The leaves are adapted to make gas exchange efficient. They are flat, thin, and have a lot of air spaces. All of this helps to keep the surface area high. Gas exchange is regulated by the opening and closing of these small gaps on the bottom of the leaves called stomata, and it's the guard cells that open and close. Carbon dioxide can enter and oxygen can leave. Here are some summary notes for the animal and plants. Pause the video if you need to take these down, okay? Okay, I think you guys are ready. Alright, we're gonna do a 6-mark question, yeah? Have a go at answering this question. You shouldn't spend more than 6 minutes on this, okay? You should get into the habit of underlining or highlighting your questions. The first 2 lines are setting up the question. The instruction begins on the 3rd line. The next line focuses your attention on what to write about. Alright, pause the video and then afterwards I'll show you Jaden's and Tatiana's answers. Okay, here are Jaden's and Tatiana's answers. The link below will take you to the mark scheme and these 2 answers, and also you'll find an answer that I recommend how you should write out these extended writing questions. If you want, you can also comment below the marks that you think you will give all of them, including myself. So far, we've been looking at how substances diffuse in and out of multi-cellular organisms that are made up of more than one cell. But how about bacteria and those single-cell organisms? Have you ever wondered why they don't need blood vessels or a respiratory system? It's actually because of their size and an idea called surface area to volume ratio. Essentially, the smaller you are, the larger your surface area to volume ratio. If that's all baffling you, don't worry, I got you, my G. Let's imagine that we've got 2 organisms shaped like cubes, yeah? And one line on organism A is the length of 1 centimeter, and one line on organism B is 3 centimeters. Cubes have 6 sides, yeah? So if we find the area of one side and multiply that by 6, we get the total surface area. The area of a square, A, is A squared, so A times A. Organism A has an area of 1 squared, so 1 times 1 gives us 1. And it has 6 sides, so 1 times 6 gives us a surface area of 6. Organism B, on the other hand, has an area of 3 squared, so 3 times 3, which is 9. 9 times 6 sides gives us a surface area of 54. Now you might be thinking, well, obviously, the bigger the better. But no, not when it comes to diffusion. Remember that the particles are moving randomly. The longer the distance, the more likely your particle is going to end up in some next place. Remember, they're not thinking, oh, I need to get to this place. They're just moving randomly. Imagine needing to get your nutrients from the surface to the middle of your organism, or removing waste from the middle of the organism to the surface. Let's consider the volume of this, and then we'll see what the problem is. The volume of a cube is just A cubed. So organism A has a total volume of 1 cubed, which is 1 times 1 times 1, which is 1. And organism B has a volume of 3 cubed, 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. Now let's compare the surface area to volume of both organism A and B. Organism A has a surface area of 6 and a volume of 1. Organism B has a surface area of 54 and a volume of 27. But we can simplify organism B. Dividing both sides by 27, we'll get a 2:1 ratio. So organism A has a surface area to volume ratio of 6:1, while organism B has a 2:1 ratio. Clearly, it is better to be smaller when it comes to surface area to volume ratio. Alright, let's wrap all of this up, yeah? We looked at what diffusion was, what affects the rate of diffusion, examples in animals and plants, and how to calculate surface area to volume ratio. Therefore, make sure you get the work from the description below, okay? And the answers will be in the next week's video. Rewatch the video if you need to freshen up once again, and don't forget to like if you like. In a bit.